Hi, I'm Sandra Magnus. I've been an astronaut for 16 years at NASA and flew twice on the shuttle and once on the space station and had a wonderful time. I left NASA. I'm now the executive director of the American Institute of Aeronautics and Astronautics. So crew selection for long duration missions, whether you're talking in 6 months on space station or beyond to living on the moon for a while or going to an asteroid or visiting Mars, is kind of important, not only from a who has what skill sets viewpoint. You want some people who have a natural affinity maybe for software, some people who are very hands-on, you have medical skills. So you have to look at the whole skill set from that viewpoint, but also you want to look at crew compatibility because you're going to put all these people in a small space and they're going to live with each other for a very long time. And so I think the process where you really figure out how compatible a crew is to put them in an environment on Earth and watch them how they interact with each other. For example, one of the things that we did to prepare for shuttle missions was the National Outdoor Leadership School, where we went as a crew and we did a trip, a 10-day trip around the Utah Canyonlands or a 7-day trip into the mountains. And when you go on an excursion like that, you cannot hide who you are. You cannot hide from yourself either. And so if you're, this person that gets crabby in the morning because you have to have food, or if you're someone who's a little bit nervous about a new thing and how you handle that, or if you're someone who has to push ahead of the group and not let the group catch up, or if you're someone who's always behind and how you handle that. I remember on my expedition with the group to Tucson, I was the slowest person. I had a heavy backpack and I was the slowest person in the group, and I had to mentally be able to handle being the slowest person in the group, in a group of, we're all chosen because we're achievers. And so how you mentally handle that, how you emotionally handle that, those kinds of stresses and those kinds of interactions and that kind of self-realization is really important when you put a crew together and understanding how they're going to react over the long term. And so I think maybe part of the crew selection process could be have some proposed crews, put them in an environment like a Knowles or an environment where you can't hide from yourself or hide from your crewmates, and you just, you're out there and expose who you are, how you handle things, and then you can understand the chemistry and help people understand themselves better. Because I think as an individual, you're a much stronger crew member if you really are highly self-realized and you know what your strengths, you know what your weaknesses are, you understand how you react to certain situations, you understand when you're stressed out, and you understand what you need to do about being stressed out. These are all very important aspects of being a successful crew member and in aggregate as a successful crew. Of course, there's always stressors during a mission, and there's stressors during training for a mission, but let's talk about the mission. So shuttle mission. Big stressor. You have a finite amount of time to get a huge amount of work done. And of course, it never goes as planned. There's always something that happens. Something's not where it's supposed to be, or something breaks. And we have contingency plans, right? But that still eats into the time that you have to get the mission done. And usually we end up going to sleep late. But that's all very stressful. And so how you handle that as a crew is really, you kind of develop that a little bit during training because you get to know each other. I know, for example, when one of my crewmates is feeling a little stressed out, because I've experienced that during training or during the Knowles, you've seen how people react to stress. If you're self-actualized enough and you're self-aware enough, you know when you're experiencing stress and you understand what you need to do. And if you're really a highly well-developed crew, you explain to your crewmates during training, this is what stresses me out. This is what I need to relieve my stress. So this is important, and so you can have those conversations ahead of time. But during a shuttle mission, you kind of morph around each other. And if you're a really well-developed crew, you look for ways to help each other when So, like I remember during my first mission, we had a kind of a stressful situation involving robotics, which I was engaged in, and I just needed to have a moment. And my crew knew that, and they gave me that moment, and they covered. And then, I covered for somebody else later. So you just do that, and we learn those kinds of things about each other during a training flow. And Knowles helps accelerate that a lot. I mentioned Knowles training. During station, the stressors can be a little bit different. There can be things going on the ground with your family that you feel like you need to be a part of, but you can't. So that's a little bit stressful. And so you learn during training how somebody may need to be appeased. For example, I was upset about something during station, and I remember one of my crewmates gave me some chocolate. It was as simple as that. So there's different levels of thing. I knew going into station, for example, and that my stress relief is exercise. I need to exercise on the ground even, or else I start getting really, tightly wound up. And so and I explained that to the flight control team. Okay, hey, this is really important to me. If we do nothing else, let's just set the exercise at the beginning of the day so I know I get it done, because sometimes if you don't put your exercise at the beginning of the day, the mission creep takes over and you really hate to stop what you're doing to go exercise because you're in the middle of a project and things like that. So that's how I watched out for my stress levels on station. And it's interesting because NOLS, one of the first things you learn as a team member is self-care. So you have to be able to take care of yourself. And sometimes when we're driven personalities, you feel like you need to push through all the boundaries. I can do this, just 10 more minutes, I can do this. And that can actually be detrimental to the team in the long run if you're not taking care of yourself. And so these are the kind of things you learn from something like a NOLS. But on station, you've been with your crewmates in training a long period of time, so you kind of understand when they need a moment alone, or when it's time to engage, or when to offer words of encouragement, or when to just pretend like nothing's happened because they don't want to talk about it. So you learn all of that stuff when you train. And a well-developed crew will do all that instinctively. But you have to put them through some engagements during training that brings those behavioral patterns out so everybody can address them during training. You don't want to be trying to figure that out during a mission. So, for example, when you train a crew to go to Mars, I would send them to Antarctica for a month or two. I would send them on a NOLS trip. I would, and let them and have conversations like this. Okay, guys, we're going to send you to this, this cave experience or this NOLS, and here's why, and here's what we want to get out of it, and help them have those conversations, because those aren't necessarily the conversations that type A personality people normally fall into. And of course, we're all type A people because we're engineers and scientists and things like that. So you have to sort of provide some coaching for that as well.